Hello, I'm Annie Graham Larkin, Executive Director of the Bisbee Mining and Historical Museum. Welcome to Haunted Bisbee with author Francine Powers. Thank you to our members and donors who enable the museum to provide free online programming and fulfill the organization's mission to discover history, explore Bisbee's past today. To learn how you can assist the museum in supporting its mission and programs by becoming a member or donor, please visit bisbeemuseum.org. On Saturday, November 15th at 11 a.m., the museum will host the free online program From the Balkans to Bisbee, the South Slav Odyssey with Mike Anderson. To register or for more information, visit the Bisbee Mining and Historical Museum Facebook page. Okay, Francine Powers is an Arizona Newspaper Foundation award-winning journalist, paranormal historian, and best-selling author. She is a Bisbee native who has been on several television shows, including Ghost Hunters, and featured in numerous newspaper articles, radio, and pods shows regarding Cochise County's history and paranormal activity. Powers is also a writer for the highly ranked Bisbee Ghost app. She is the author of Me, Reina, Don't Be Afraid, the first book about Bisbee's ghost, published in 2004. And she's the author of Haunted Bisbee, Haunted Cochise County, and Wicked Bisbee. If you would like to ask questions during the program today, please type your questions in the Q&A chat box. We'll gather these questions to share with our speaker after the presentation. Also, a link to the recording of today's program will be sent to all of our Zoom registrants later today. Included in that email will also be a link to the museum's online store where you can purchase a copy of Haunted Bisbee. And with that, thank you so much, Francine, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. And I just love doing anything with the Bisbee Museum. And of course, like yourself, being a Bisbee native, anything to contribute to the history of Bisbee and to just show what a great place this has been for, over 100 years. And just to do this as a continuation for generations.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I guess I want to get started because these are just a collection of some of my very favorite ghost stories, and I hope I can cover them all. So I'm going to disappear and start. I'm going to do some short history. Bisbee was discovered in 1877 by John A. Rucker with 15 men of Company C, 6th Cavalry from Fort Bowie, along with Jack Dunn and their packer T.D. Byrne, who claimed the first mine there and called it the Rucker. They were on an exhibition to find out if there was an Apache encampment there. After a search for fresh water, Dunn found at or near Castle Rock an indication of the presence of lead, copper, silver, and gold. A few weeks later, a prospector with a long life of trauma and drama named George Warren was grub-staked by Dunn to find more rich spots. Warren was supposed to name Dunn in all notices he might find. Warren found more claims but never listed Dunn on any he located. 56 days after the Rucker mine was discovered, Warren claimed the Mercy mine. Soon, this area now known as Bisbee was hailed as the Queen of Copper Camps. Bisbee was founded in 1880 and incorporated in 1902. The first school teacher in Bisbee was Clara J. Stillman. In 1929, the county seat of Cochise County was changed from Tombstone to Bisbee. The name of the town was given in honor of Judge DeWitt Bisbee. The mines and surrounding properties were solely owned in later years by the Phelps Dodge Company, but are now owned by Freeport, McMoran, Copper, and Gold. There are 2,300 miles of mine tunnels under Bisbee, Lowell, and Warren. During Bisbee's mining period, more than 3 million ounces of gold and 8 billion pounds of copper were extracted. The Calumet and Arizona Mining Company decided that the nationally acclaimed City Beautiful movement would be an excellent model for the new town site of Warren. It was completed around 1907. The underground mining operation stopped in 1974, while surface mining ended in 1975. The original segment of Bisbee and its residential area became a historical district in 1980. On to our first story, Spirit-Laden House. At Upper Tombstone Canyon, at the end of a narrow and extremely steep road, sits an original Bisbee house. This house is my childhood home. My parents bought that house in the late 1960s and was the first place I lived and the first place I experienced life of the supernatural. At the time of its paranormal high of activity, I was entering the first grade. I had 3 older sisters and 1 brother then. My 2 eldest sisters are identical twins. The Ouija board was very popular in the early 1970s, and the twins decided to get their hands on it. Almost simultaneously, the paranormal occurrences began. Once my mother found out, she took that game board and went outside and broke it onto her knee. That didn't seem to stop the hauntings, as ghostly footsteps from different parts of the house were heard in the middle of the night, and the lights would flicker on and off at unexpected moments. One of my sisters said she was watching TV, and in the reflection of its screen, she saw a figure walk behind her when no one else was in the room, along with puffs of cigarette smoke appearing out of thin air. My father said he heard a ball bouncing in my bedroom. He went to scold who he thought was playing with it, me, and no one was there. Another sister claimed she heard our mother washing dishes and yelled to her for water. When she didn't answer, she checked on her. No one was at the sink doing such a chore. Eerie situations were happening at the house every day and night. I experienced the haunting, but in a more personal way. I felt a warm and sweet connection with the spirit. At certain times, I could hear a younger woman sing. Her voice was pleasant, but there was another entity in the home. He was an angry, jealous, and violent male presence. I didn't like him and was terrified when I felt his company. One night, I awoke to a slender figure at the side of my bed. I called out the names of my 2 teen-age twin sisters. The figure moved from the side of my bed and stood behind a lampshade on a nearby nightstand. I recall saying out loud to the woman, "What?" The figure's long, tapered fingers clung to the lampshade as she looked at me, tilting her head side to side. She seemed as confused as me. I watched her move and could hear her hard shoes on the wooden floor. She took a few steps back and the floor creaked. She moved into the moonlight shining from our open bedroom window. The curtains were billowing behind her. Suddenly, I could see all of her. Her hair was in a tight bun held by a large comb. Her eyes were gentle. She had on a long-sleeved blouse with the collar up to her neck, hiding every inch of her skin. She had a tiny waist and wore a long skirt reaching down to her laced-up ankle boots. She was lovely. I realized it wasn't one of my sisters, and without breaking our gaze, put my head on my pillow. Then she took 2 more steps back, put her hands in a praying position, bowed her head, then sank through the floor, gliding down and out of my sight. The other ghost, let me get this out of the way. The other ghost, well, he made appearances in much more dramatic ways. During a dinner, our 5 dogs started to bark and howl outside. Then suddenly the sound of tin cans being dragged around the house erupted. We all stared at each other in shock. Then above our heads in the attic, the sounds of a physical fist fight unleashed. My father got up from the dinner table and went directly to the door that led to the attic. He yelled, "Who's there?" There was no answer, and the sounds of the fight stopped. My parents decided to call Father Gilbert Padilla, a priest from our Catholic church, St. Patrick's. He came to do a house blessing. During that afternoon visit, he went to each room and threw holy water as he recited prayers of protection and the release of any suppressed spirit residing there. After that, things calmed down, but not completely. My mother was taking an afternoon nap and woke up to an eyeless face floating on her bedroom wall. This pushed my parents to call Father Padilla for another house blessing. He wasn't available, so the next day, Father Thomas Rice arrived at our house. Almost immediately after the priest entered the living room, the sound of another fight started in the attic. The priest asked how to get up there. My father led him to the attic door. He opened it for him, and Father Rice made the sign of the cross and went up the stairs as my father followed. The priest began to pray, and as he got to the third step from the top, he stopped, and his voice grew louder. He turned and extended his arm to my father to halt. The priest's blood seemed to drain from his face. When he reached the top, he looked like he was going to faint. He mustered his courage and continued up the stairway, then took a few steps into the room. The fighting stopped. The priest then began to descend the steps and hurry toward the door. Suddenly, he was pushed from behind and flew toward all of us at the bottom of the stairs. He fell into the wall and collapsed into the steps. Straight after that incident, Father Rice said he was going to recommend a special mass for further protection for our family, and he was going to meet with Father Padilla. He said to my parents, I will discuss the urgency of this situation. I'm going to recommend an exorcism. Decades later, and as an adult, I interviewed Father Stanley Nadonley from St. Patrick's. Father Nadonley said since his arrival, he had only performed about 12 house blessings in Bisbee, but denies ever witnessing an exorcism during his service there. The priest explained that the bishop from the diocese must give permission for an exorcism to take place. There are an appointed exorcist to perform the solemn rituals called major exorcism or simple exorcism. Father Nadonley explained that spirits do not possess homes or objects because they have no souls. Exorcism is meant to drive out demons or dark spirits from the bodies and souls of the living and has a lingering outcome on houses or sites where paranormal sightings have occurred. Nadonley said a major exorcism is for the express purpose of exorcising diabolical spirits from the body of man. He added the exorcist who entered our home may have read a simple exorcism prayer to free our family from the entities. Well, back to the day of the supernatural events all those years ago. The bishop from the Tucson diocese approved the religious event. It began with a mass in our living room. The officiant was positioned near the floor heater that had earlier been tagged as some sort of vortex. As the priest recited his sermon, I began to hear her sing again, ever so faintly. The priest said, I will read out loud from this book and walk through each room of the house as I bless each corner with holy water. Each of you will follow me close behind. Fear nothing, for Christ is here. As the reverend walked, I noticed he had a crucifix placed in the seam of his book. As he began to whip holy water from his silver scepter, I also heard a quiet wind begin to blow. As he walked through the kitchen, a slamming door echoed through the house. He paused, then continued to the next room. The house seemed to tremble, and now I could hear wind howling in my ear. The priest stopped in different places along his path and began to read louder. The windows of my parents' bedroom began to vibrate, then shake. He ignored that and continued around the house. We eventually came back around to the living room, and he immediately stopped because the laundry room door whipped open and slammed shut. The holy man went to the swinging door and grabbed the doorknob and entered the room. At this point, our dogs were howling and whimpering outside. Inside the room, a deep man's voice recited nasty obscenities. The priest was spreading holy water in every corner as the growling voice continued. The ritual seemed to be at its peak, and just when I thought I couldn't bear it another moment, everything stopped. After the purification, the odd noises and haunting seemed to end, or at least we hoped it did. Now, approximately 50 years later, there have been continuous paranormal incidences occurring in that same house. It has been reported that sounds of a radio will go on when a person approaches the home, even though at those times no electricity was hooked up. Others have heard banging coming from within the house, as well as a man screaming. Several photographs have captured a woman dressed in turn of the 20th century style clothes on the porch and in the front windows. Some have claimed to hear a deep growling noise from the front yard. Several pictures have captured up to 10 floating faces on the front porch and a shadow creature in a hooded cloak on the street in front of the house. The exorcism may have claimed the spirits, but it did not close the vortex. My mother may have left the opening to the other side open, but by not destroying the Ouija board correctly, by burning or burying the game, and making this spirit-laden home the most haunted house in Bisbee. This photo here is not AI generated. It is a picture I was able to capture. I've done several ghost hunts there, and one evening I walked up to the house and I just started taking pictures, trying to surprise whatever spirit might be in there. And when I got home, we looked over the evidence, and there she was looking at us through the window. And that's the same ghost that I wrote about and saw as a child. And so she's still there. And another time I was up there, I was out actually in the street in front of the home, and I was able to catch this EVP. And this is in communication with the male ghost. And I'm going to play it twice. And if you could, just so you can hear it, raise your volume. Hear that we're outside of your house? I'll play it another time. You hear that we're outside of your house? So yeah, when I first heard that, that was really and what I hear is I ask him if he cares or he's upset that I'm outside, and he says no, come inside. So I don't really go back to that house. Bisbee Fire Station #2. This busy fire station sits almost directly in the middle of Tombstone Canyon Road, about 1 mile from Highway 80. After 1910, Upper Tombstone Canyon was expanding and is one of the nicer parts of town. More than 1,000 houses had sprung up, and the citizens were demanding their own fire station by 1914. Surprisingly, some members of the city council were opposed to another firehouse, saying there was not enough fresh water or drainage and the property was flood prone. Eventually, the council voted to buy the property for the new fire station. The building was completed September 30th, 1914, and was modernized in 1993. The plans for the building included a two-story structure, all concrete, with living quarters for the firemen upstairs and a pole for a fast slide down the main floor, where the horses and wagons were kept. Bisbee Fire Department history includes the first volunteer fire department that was created on October 1st, 1894. The headquarters was located on Main Street. In 1898, a brick structure was built on the north side of the same street as the new headquarters. It had a bell on top of the building that alerted fires. It was located next to where the Bank of Bisbee building is today. The volunteer crew depended upon a natural water supply and bucket brigade. In later years, there was also a firehouse down on Naka Road near the entrance of what is now Old Bisbee. But the route from there to Upper Tombstone Canyon was very curvy for horse-drawn fire wagons used at the time and didn't sit well for the residents up the canyon. In May of 2008, the Bisbee Fire Department celebrated 100 years as Arizona's full-time paid crews. During October of 1908, Bisbee had the worst disaster of its history. A fire destroyed almost the entire Main Street. Property valued at nearly $750,000 in the business section of the town, and $3,000 worth of residence property was destroyed. This was the largest fire ever recorded there. And now, present times, as you enter the front door of the building, you will enter at the garage. The first thing you will see is a fire truck and emergency vehicle. There is also the original fire pole still intact and to your left. Before the renovation, the entire upstairs living quarters was completely switched around. The sleeping area was in the front and open with bed liners lined in rows. The kitchen and recreation area were in the back. The modernization of the building was designed for more firefighters in the future and other crews during other emergency situations, such as wildfire crews. There is a fire hose dryer in front of the building, and the only one of its kind. It is in front of the building and over an approximate 50-foot deep ditch. During the early 1970s, Bisbee firemen built the structure. Well, let's get into the ghost story. For several years, a rumor had been circling around Bisbee that fire station #2 was haunted. I used to be the editor-in-chief of our family-owned online paranormal magazine called Spirits of Cochise County, and organized a ghost hunt to see if the rumor was true. Our investigation was the first of the station and took place in 2009. The backstory is that a former firefighter who had died of a mysterious gunshot wound while at home is the resident ghost. At first, he was thought to have committed suicide, but then later it changed to an accidental death. The fireman lived close to the station. When he did not show up for work, a co-worker went straight for him at his house and found him dead. The new retired firefighter said he thinks his friend is haunting the historic building. With a humorous and mischievous type of paranormal activity over the years, he believes his now deceased co-worker is the ghost. The retired firefighter said, "My friend always said if he died, he would come back and haunt the station." Generations of firefighters have had numerous paranormal experiences and expressed them openly. They also use the resident ghost as part of the new guy on shift initiation. They'll leave the new firefighter alone in the building or assign him or her to lock up the building on their own. Some ghostly activity includes different doors down the hall of the bedrooms open after they were locked and at night. The shower in the upstairs quarters of the station turns on by itself. Numerous witnesses have seen wet footprints along the hallway, leading away from the bathroom. Pots and pans jangle around on their own, and the apparition of a fireman has been seen in different areas of the building. Witnesses say they have seen the ghost walk straight through a wall near the kitchen. Footsteps coming up the steep stairs to the second level when nobody was there are commonly heard. Phantasmal sounds of tinkering around downstairs at the tool bench near the fire trucks is a common occurrence at the station. Firefighters have also reported that they have felt their hands or arms being touched as to wake them up while they slept and the feeling of being held down while they sleep. For the duration of the ghost hunt, a few emergency calls blared through the building. When the second call came in, we caught a chilling EVP of an eerie voice responding to a medical emergency call. During the actual radio correspondence, a male voice belonging to emergency personnel asks the female voice if she needs assistance. The female voice responds with almost instantly. A disembodied voice responds with, "Moving." Was this the voice of the resident ghost who seems to still be on duty? After the paranormal investigation, I asked the ghost to play a prank on the two firefighters who gave us a tour of the station. After we finished with our ghost hunt, the fireman walked us to the door. We left, and I was told when the firefighters came back into the main living area of the station, a light bulb burst into pieces. Then right after it exploded, it buzzed and made a loud noise. The fireman said they laughed and wanted to make sure that I knew that the ghost obliged to my request. During a special Halloween haunted cart tour I was hosting, I once again made communication with the ghost. There was a fireman's helmet hanging near the front light. As I spoke in front of the building, one of my guests on the tour mentioned the hat was swinging. I must add the night was cold, but was still with no breeze. We as a group realized the ghost was trying to communicate with me. I asked him if he was happy that I was back telling his story. The hat swung left to right. I was filled with emotion as I watched the helmet move. Then I saw the helmet begin to swing in circles. I told the spirit, "Thank you for letting me know my work here at the fire station is appreciated by a soul so good and brave." It swung even harder. Then suddenly, it just stopped moving completely. During another tour, my group and I were on the cement bridge over the deep ditch, directly in front of the building. A woman decided to try to sit on the bridge's pipe fence during my lecture. She said she couldn't maintain her balance and screamed that someone grabbed her arm and pushed her off the fence onto solid ground. She said it was the dead fireman. "He saved me from falling down into the ditch." She added, "He saved my life." Cochise County Superior Court, the Bisbee Courthouse. Numerous historical newspaper articles and books report that there was a very heated Cochise County election on November 19, 1929. It was decided on that fall day that the county seat from Tombstone would be moved to Bisbee. By December 1st, the Cochise County Board of Supervisors picked the location for the new courthouse on Higgins Hill off Tombstone Canyon Road. Bonds in the amount of $300,000 were approved on February 25th, 1930 for the construction of the Pueblo Depot building. It would be for the courts and offices of the county officials and a jail that would be built on site. The total cost of the building was actually $250,000 and was finished by 1931. The architect was Roy Place from Tucson, and the Clinton Campbell Construction Company was the contractor from Phoenix. A dedication of the building was made on August 3rd, 1931 by Arizona Governor George W.P. Hunt. On July 3rd, 1980, This courthouse was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The new county jail was built in 1985 with 160 cells. That jail is located on Highway 80 on the outskirts of Bisbee. Well, during the turn of the millennium, I was working at the Bisbee Courthouse as a clerk. Within days of working there, I started experiencing odd phenomena. One morning, I was having a conversation with a security guard named Hector. We discussed how there was a lot of eerie noises and sensations that the building seemed to produce. I told him about hearing footsteps upstairs in the lobby when no one else was around and being completely creeped out when I had to go upstairs and look for court files in the old jail, and when I had to go downstairs for different files where the sheriff department used to be located. That's where I saw an apparition of a woman dressed in red dashing right by me. He told me about his own experiences and how he heard similar noises during different shifts and how at random times the courthouse doors would slam shut on their own. He said other employees would confess to hearing several voices speaking when he or other would come in for work when the building was empty. The odd noises and door slamming may be part of a residual haunting, a memory with a thick string lingering from the past attached to a building filled with erupting emotions. The female entity who I saw in the old sheriff's office isn't the only ghost too stubborn to leave the courthouse. This ghost has been seen by many and seen well enough to compare him to his picture hanging in the same building. His name is John Wilson Ross, the first Cochise County Superior Judge at the new courthouse. He served there from 1931 to 1943 and died in 1945 at the age of 82. Judge Ross was a very significant and prominent Bisbee resident. He ran as a Republican candidate for the Superior Court judge at Tombstone in 1911, but by 1914, he was holding meetings for the Progressive Party at his office located in Bisbee. He was one of the leading lawyers in Arizona and was on many various committees and councils. The judge had a largely attended meeting at Bisbee City Park to organize a circulation of the petitions for nominating the city as a candidate for the courthouse in the spring of 1918. By November of that same year, while working as a Cochise County attorney, he accepted the position of Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of Arizona. He was a brother of Henry D. Ross, and at the time, Henry was already a member of the state Supreme Court. Judge John Ross's wife, Lydia Norris Ross, was also involved with the community as part of Bisbee's Gilded Society. They shared a lovely brick veneered home on Shattuck Street in the Warren District. The apparition of Judge Ross has been seen in the Division II courtroom and the judge's chambers, along with the smell of a cigar or cigarettes. He has also been seen in the second floor lobby. During a ghost hunt several years ago, I saw the ghost walk from the judge's bench back to his chambers in that same courtroom. There have also been numerous reports of witnesses seeing him in the old jail on the top floors of the courthouse as well. A custodian reported that as she was mopping at the foot of the stairway in front of the main entrance of the courthouse and facing the doors, she felt as if someone was looking at her. The feeling was so intense she had to stop mopping and turned around and looked up the stairway. There was a man dressed in a 40s era three-piece suit staring back down at her. The county worker was taken aback and said the man had wired glasses and was rubbing his chin as he peered at her. The worker said he had crazy eyes. The custodian says she looked down for a moment, and when she looked up towards the steps again, the apparition had vanished. After all these years, after his death, his robust and dominating presence is still felt by many who are brought to this place to be held accountable for their actions or to be acquitted of any charges. Nevertheless, Judge John W. Ross will be witness to their fate and will in his own way make sure his courthouse is still being preserved in its beauty and its justice. The Wills House. On a shapely turn at Upper Brewery Gulch sits a gorgeous Victorian set of 3 buildings built by George B. Wills, an English immigrant who registered in the Arizona Territory as a bricklayer in 1898. The 38-year-old was known for recycling used bricks for construction. He built this complex in an English row house style. Wills lived there with his sister and a homeless girl they took in sometime around when the buildings were being constructed. There are 2 separate 2-story buildings and 1 single level. One of the two storage structures, farthest to the left, was the first one that was finished around 1902. It housed 3 apartments, one being the Wills home. The building plan seemed not to be thought out carefully at the beginning stages. There is a stairway in between the original structure, and the second one covers the window in the ground floor apartment of the first section of the building. There was 8 apartments and 1 bath in the second building. The single-story building was built with 5 apartments, which were extremely tiny, the smallest being 10 feet by 10 feet. This apartment complex sat in the borders of the Bisbee red light district. It was rumored that this complex was used as a place for prostitution. Some say the young homeless girl was really a woman of ill repute and the lead girl of the family business. There was also a trapdoor located on the front porch of the single-level building. This door led to stairs which led to a passage beneath the porch. Leading off this passage are 2 rooms, which have doors and windows. These were the same size of 2 rooms above them. Some say these were used as cribs for prostitution purposes and even as illegal storage for liquor. A man named Thomas Constable was another Englishman living at the complex who became a citizen in the Arizona Territory in 1892. Records show he was registered as a 43-year-old minor in 1896. He became a longtime tenant in one of the small apartments in the 1-story building. He was a popular gardener for the Copper Queen Hospital who later had some sort of accident and had a bad limp. Constable was a bachelor and raised greyhound dogs and had a reputation for chasing neighborhood children and raising his cane to them if they were caught teasing his dogs. During several of my haunted historical cart tours at night, guests had caught on different occasions a glowing human figure standing in between the 2 tall buildings. In the photos, it appears as though the figure was peeking around one of the buildings looking at the tour group. No one claimed to see the apparition with their naked eye, but only saw it in the photos. Footsteps were also heard walking across the porch of the 1-story building. When flashlights were shined on the porch, no one was seen, but still heard. Orbs were caught in pictures on the porch, as well in the small front yard of the complex. These buildings were being used as apartments and in recent years were renovated into beautiful living spaces. On a few tours, the owner of the complex at the time invited my guest and myself inside for a quick look. The owner explained how the shotgun-style apartments were laid out and what materials he used to carefully renovate. On one occasion, he owned a small tour to do a quick ghost hunt. At a yard in the back, one of the buildings, one of my guests began to communicate with a male entity. She asked the spirit's name and received only murmured voice saying he was proud of his place. She asked if he was pleased with the new renovations, and the answer was yes. To confirm their conversation, she asked for the spirit to make a noise. We waited only a few moments when a rock hit the top of a roof. Was the woman on my tour communicating with Mr. Wills? Was the glowing entity seen in between the 2 buildings the gardener of the old Copper Queen Hospital who was still standing guard of his beloved greyhounds? The phantom footsteps at the single-story building and orbs photographed in the complex's community front yard, did they belong to prostitutes or a few of their clients? Regardless, the paranormal activities surrounding those buildings are intriguing. And in my opinion, I believe these buildings are one of the most beautiful and gorgeous in Bisbee. And when you look at it, it so screams Bisbee. Loretto School and the Coffee Nun. Loretto was Bisbee's Catholic school in Higgins Hill behind and to the side of the Bisbee Courthouse. The Loretto Academy is only a few feet away from the town's 4th Catholic Church and Bisbee's 2nd St. Patrick's Church. The first church was a small cabin near Naco Road from 1884 to 1890 and was the first organized church in a mining camp. A large adobe building located on Quality Hill was a second Catholic church, and as the town grew, so did the congregation. In 1891, enough funds were raised and a new building was constructed at School Hill on Clawson Avenue named St. Patrick's. By 1896, a rectory was built for a priest who shared his time in Bisbee and Tombstone. St. Patrick's was a segregated congregation at the time and over 4,000 members who were Mexican Americans and Mexican nationals, were able to build a Catholic church of their own. They erected the building on Chihuahua Hill, which sits high above Bury Gulch. Father Windermere came to take over the Anglo-American parish in 1905 and soon realized a need for a Catholic school. Thomas Higgins, who at this point had moved to Los Angeles, was a very prominent Bisbee miner and owner of many valuable mines in Bisbee. He donated a parcel of the surface land of his mining claim called Aurora. As soon as he heard about the school, he decided to help. Fundraising was very successful and enough money was collected for the construction of the academy. By 1907, a mission revival style three-story building was finished. It was originally named as the Loretto School and was a K-12 grade academy ran by the Loretto nuns. The school was designed by Henry Truss. The Loretto School was not segregated as the two parishes were and did allow all students of both ethnic backgrounds to attend. It was later renamed St. Patrick's School and closed its doors in the early 1970s. For decades, the downstairs bathrooms have had a reputation for a place that was spooky and was often avoided by students. Children have claimed that they have seen an apparition of an elderly nun who may have lived in the local abbey. She has been seen on the bottom floor and where bathrooms are located. She has been seen wearing the black floor-length gown and habit traditionally worn by Catholic nuns years ago. A clue she is near is when a strong aroma of coffee will arise before her appearance. For many years, the Loretto sisters were housed on a large building on Taylor Avenue near Central School, but were eventually moved to a large, more modern home right across the academy. The woman who haunts the old and now empty school most likely lived on Taylor Avenue. The ghost will also turn on the water faucets of the bathroom when someone enters, and she shows herself in the mirrors as she dashes past and behind the hand washer, causing a light breeze. Why would such a religious person linger in this world as a supernatural entity is a great mystery. She may have been quite content in the role of teacher, even during the times when the building was only used for catechism, years after it closed as an official school. To keep order, making sure all children washed their hands, and to see to it that there was no running in the halls. Bisbee Restoration Museum. At 37 Main Street, a gorgeous three-story building with a large basement sits with an original signage cemented above the doorway. This building used to be the location for the fair store and is now home of the Bisbee Restoration Museum. The original building was severely damaged during the great 1908 Bisbee fire. In fact, one of the fair store owners, Sam Frankenberg, was one of the first witnesses of the fire, which started at the original Grand Hotel, only a few doorways up the street. An estimated cost of $300,000 of stock and warehouse goods were lost at the store as well as the building itself. There was a grand opening of the new completed store in November of 1909. Sam's brother, Ben Frankenberg Sr., he actually began the fair store in a tiny room on Bury Avenue. It was only 15 by 20 square feet. Soon the business outgrew the space, forcing Ben to move into the large structure called the Costello Building on Main Street. Success was always in the cards for this fair store as it expanded past the space of that building too. In December of the year 1900, the brothers took over more space of the building, giving them ample sections for various departments. Not only did they have more room for displays, but they also had the large 36 by 80 square foot warehouse room. This was located on Subway Street and had a breezeway extending from the second story. By 1901, it was owned and ran by the firm called Frankenberg Brothers and Newman. The storage departments were elegant at a high end. The fair store policy was one of come and see, as they had a tremendous reputation for their glorious displays of merchandise in all departments. Sam managed the men's and carpet departments. He and his brother would go on 3-week excursions to Chicago and New York to find the best quality of fine material for sewing and the latest fashion for clothing, hats, and shoes. As the years went by, the fair store kept up with the times. At one point, they had a whole slew of seamstresses and tailors for all customers. They wanted to make sure everyone was custom fitted and were satisfied with their purchases. The Frankenbergs ran it as the fair store until 1928. After that, it became various types of businesses. It was a woman's clothing store, dry goods store, and a Western auto store. By 1968, the building was donated by the Frankenberg, Newman, and Costello families to the Restoration Council of Bisbee and instantly turned into the museum it is today. It is an extraordinary place that is full of donated items from people with ties to Bisbee. It is called the People's Museum, as it displays how people have lived in the mining town from when it was a camp to present times. During the span of time of my tour business, I was able to ghost hunt in various Bisbee buildings. The old Costello building was one of them. I worked closely with the volunteers at the Bisbee Restoration Museum and learned from a couple of volunteers that there was a resident ghost and it had shown itself at different occasions. A volunteer said she had seen an apparition of a woman on the second floor. Another staff member said she heard various noises in the same area and sometimes near the sewing machines, at times when she knew she was the only person in the building. She also stated that she's heard a phantom-type woman's voice saying something faintly as she unlocks the front door. On my birthday a few years ago, 3 of us, after hours and at night, we were able to convey and seek out the ghost at the museum. We settled down in the large area in between the first and second floors, sitting on some chairs with the lights off. We began to ask the resident ghost a slur of questions. We then asked her to tap somewhere in the building to answer yes. She did, near the antique sewing machine display. We told her we would recite the alphabet and asked her to tap when we got to the letters in her name. By the end of the session, she communicated Elena. We asked, did you work in the fair store? She tapped. No response to having the positions as a shop girl, clerk, or a sales lady, but yes to a seamstress. We asked her if she recognized the individuals there that night. She tapped yes to the staff members, but no to me. We asked if the ghost knew Ben Frankenberg. She said yes, and that she was not alone in the building, that her son was with her. Through more various questions, we understood she was in her 30s and had brought her young son to work, which made her happy. She also confessed that her son liked to jest and move things around in the museum. She stopped responding. After that, we sat in silence just for a few moments, when suddenly we heard quick, short steps coming from one side of the second floor above us to the other. The sound was coming from hard-soled shoes in petite strides. I whispered loudly and said to the others, "Do you hear that?" They nodded yes. That was the last oddity that took place that evening. But if you have the fortune of visiting the old Costello building on Bisbee's Main Street, you might run into a young seamstress from a time when Bisbee was at its finest and a little boy who may be lurking behind a counter ready to play a game of hide and seek. Bisbee City Park. Bisbee's first city cemetery, located between Opera Drive and Brewery Avenue, was created sometime in the late 1880s. Because it had depleted to just ruins, it was closed as a cemetery and transformed into a city park. Another theory why the cemetery closed is it was a public health concern, that since the burial ground was upslope from water wells, they would be contaminated, causing or adding to the typhoid outbreaks taking place in the town's early history. A collage of photos in the Bisbee Review, dated from 1913, shows laundry being dried on some of the fences surrounding the graves of the dead, while others were falling apart and in shambles. The old cemetery had become an utter eyesore. Maybe they were in that condition because there wasn't family left in Bisbee to tend to those graves. The majority of those buried there were single men and some from other countries without families living in proximity. The site was an embarrassment and a danger zone for neighborhood children as well. As early as 1910, complaints were being brought to the city council for some sort of solution. That same year, a petition was presented by I.W. Wallace on behalf of the Board of Education to the city council to use the site of the old cemetery for a building to use to segregate children of African descent. Plans were eventually brought to the council, but it was the voice of the board and Bisbee residents to choose the property for a playground instead. Children were already using the old cemetery as a play area anyway. If they weren't there, they were running in the very narrow streets, barely avoiding cars, horses, and wagons. A very chaotic and unsafe situation. A playground committee was formed by the commercial club to plan for the park for the neighborhood children. In the article in the Bisbee Daily Review with the headline, Dilapidated Graveyard or Playground Witch, members of the committee during a council meeting explained the law regarding city and town cemeteries enacted by the Legislative Assembly of the Territory of Arizona. The law reads, whenever any ground used as a cemetery within any city limits has been abandoned and ceased to be used for such purposes, is unfit or unsuited or becomes obnoxious and can be used for other public purposes to better advantage the city or town to use the grounds and be vacated, that the remains of the persons buried there be removed to some other cemetery or suitable place. The expense of such removal will be paid by the city or town. The law also reads that whenever the remains are removed, all monuments and gravestones shall also be removed and replaced at the new cemetery. The graves were to be numbered and a list of the names of the buried kept. The question of abandonment of the old cemetery was made easily. During a special meeting with the city council in January of 1913, Secretary Gray of the Commercial Club said, "We want to place all these bodies where they will be decently cared for, where the graves will be kept as they should be. We want no desecration of graves, but on the contrary, want them made sacred." The removal of bodies to Evergreen Cemetery began around January 19th of 1915 and was completed on the 22nd. Walter Hubbard of Bowen and Hubbard from the Palace and Undertaking Company had the contract to clear the cemetery. There were badly organized records of the dead and were written only in pencil on various pieces of paper. Many names were labeled unknown, including an unknown baby. Some were nervous that not all the bodies were removed, but there was a diplomatic and vigilant transfer of the graves to Evergreen Cemetery before the constructing and landscaping of the park began. 34 bodies were removed and relocated. 3 of those were identified. The last recorded person to be buried there was in 1898, the infant son of H.M. Woods. The city park had a formal dedication on May 20th, 1916, with Governor Hunt in attendance. The city also used the public park for ceremonies for draftees leaving for different wars and had a multiple of dances. These type of events held at the park are perfect since it has a grand band shell and a smooth concrete floor. One person was quoted as saying she would never attend a dance at City Park, for she was not for sure of all the bodies had been removed, and she refused to dance on the dead. Onto the ghost or ghost of this area. When I was a junior high student, my family moved into the Bury Gulch neighborhood and lived in a house directly above the city park. On the entrance off the 75 steps on the street-free side of the park is where I met up with a boy. In my book, Reina, Don't Be Afraid, I journaled about the experience. Well, I often enter the park through that same entrance and is where I saw an apparition of a boy. He wasn't evil, or didn't even give me a feeling of danger, but gave off the emotion of despair. He was always pointing at the ground. We know that there are no body-filled coffins under City Park, but I do remember feeling he was a very domineering person and felt he was protecting or watching over something near the entrance. Meanwhile, in 2004, Debbie Branning, director of the MVD Ghost Chasers out of Mesa, held a ghost workshop in town and visited the park. She realized after she read my book that she had a paranormal experience at the same area. She said that while speaking at the same entrance, she suddenly felt a spine-tingling cold breeze rush through her. She then felt nauseous and dizzy. Days after, whenever she looked into her mirror, a young boy would somehow shadow her own reflection. Sometime later, we got together and went back to where we had experienced the same haunting. As we stood at the park entrance, she asked me to stand where I sensed the boy. I did, and she relayed that was the same spot she had her experience. We decided to try to communicate with the ghost. She grabbed a long twig and put it on the ground. We asked the boy a list of questions while asking him to answer yes by moving it. And this took place here, and I was sitting here, and Debbie was standing there, and the twig was right there. He was asked if he remembered me. His response was yes. We asked his age. We listed the numbers from 9 to 14. The twig moved at 12. We asked if his mother was buried here and if he thought she was still in that same place. He said yes. But when asked if he wanted to leave, he said no. After a while, he didn't respond anymore. He seemed to vanish or simply grow too tired to communicate. This was also part of my haunted tour, and I had many more paranormal experiences there. I would usually leave the golf cart above the park and walk down the same set of stairs with my group. And during a tour, as I was speaking near the band shell and the stair entrance, the large bow of my jacket was untied by invisible hands. It seems every time I'm on that site, the boy ghost rushes to my side. Since Debbie had that experience of the ghost following her home, I always insisted that he never had permission to follow me. I also encouraged guests of all my tours to tell him out loud or to themselves to do the same. Other tour guests have recorded a male voice at the same spot and pictures of a white, flowy fog and bright sunny daylight. The entrance is not the only place where paranormal activity has been reported. A guest refused to walk near a far tree by the street gate as she saw a tall shadow person standing still, watching and listening to the tour. She said it was an unnatural being and couldn't decipher if it was a ghost or demon. This frightened her so much we had to cut the tour short and leave.
Well, thank you so much, Francine. Whew. That was quite a presentation.
Oh,
Um,
great.
yes, it was fantastic. Um, so do you still do ghost hunts in Bisbee at all?
Um, uh, when I'm invited, I will. And so yes.
And there was one place that you didn't mention, and I know these were just a few of the stories from your publication, um, but ghosts underground. Do you have any stories of ghosts underground in your book?
The only one I mention is the famous one of the headless miner. And that was depicted in, I think, a 1905 article, which is really great because the Bisbee Review, the Daily Review, used to publish ghost stories. And so I think that's really cool. But as many as you know very well, all the traumatic accidents that would happen with the miners underground. And I think there probably is some ghosts besides that one. And because of the material in the earth, that actually suppresses or is a magnet for supernatural energy.
And we've been asked if you give tours.
No, I do not. I do not do that anymore. Um, I had my, the historical haunted tours, and then I used to do the golf carts. I was the first one to do that, and that was really popular. But no, I don't. But I do have, along with Chris Whitney, he's the owner of the Bisbee Ghost app, and there's actually tours on that. So you could do self-guided tours, which is really cool too, because you could do it on your own time and at your own pace. And it has a lot of the history and the ghost stories along with it.
And do you have any stories about the Bank of Bisbee? And if so, the time period?
The Bank at Bisbee, no, I do not. Um, when I wrote, all the things I've written, I really focus first on the history of the site, and then along with the ghost story, which hopefully, go together, which gives a more of a concrete truth to the ghost story. But as far as Main Street, you know, Bisbee was so wealthy. It came up so quickly. It outshined as far as wealth, Tombstone, but it was still pretty rowdy. And so I don't know of any ghost stories there at that building, but I'm sure there's something, if not residual.
And what do you think is the most haunted building in Bisbee?
Besides my childhood home,
Yes.
well, uh, it used to be the Schoolhouse Inn, and now it's the gallery. I can't think of the name. I think that building, it was built in 1918, and it was a schoolhouse, And it has, I used to do a lot of tours there too. I would take my group up there, and it has a lot of residual haunting, which just means a memory. People will hear children laughing. They will hear children running in the halls. I don't think any children die there are actually haunting, but I just think it's actually those memories that people are hearing. But others have seen down. Okay, so the building is up high above Garfield Park, and it used to be the park for the schoolhouse. And before that, it was actually, part of just wilderness. And of course, we know the Apaches and the cavalry were up and down that area. And I have people that have reported to seeing actual ghosts of the cavalry down below, and they've seen Native Americans, apparitions of them. So we have all of that energy going. And then there's also a female ghost in one of the rooms, and they've seen her come through the wall from the outside in the back. So I think that's another one of the most haunted places in Bisbee, and it's one of the Tombstone Canyon. Again, there's so many mining tunnels underneath Old Bisbee, and there's so much rich ore, and that dirt, I really believe is a magnet for good and bad energy.
We are the one of the most mineralogically diverse localities in the world. We're among the top 5, so
Yeah, I really think those go hand in hand.
I wouldn't doubt it. And do you have any stories about the old Bisbee High School?
Um, no, I do not. Um, my mother went to high school there, and I do have a lot of history on the actual building, how it came from starting off at Central School. There was too many kids; they need a new high school for the teenagers. But no, I don't. If anything, again, there's probably a lot of residual haunting because it's been used for, from the high school health department offices. I remember, I don't know, Annie, if you do, and I'm a little older than you, but when it was the health department, that's where I went and got my shots for beginning of school. I remember that very well.
Well, me
But
too.
but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe someone, again, like a Loretto school, maybe someone who was a teacher there, maybe they come back to visit. But I don't know of any, deaths, murders, or anything like that there. I'm going to repeat myself. If it is haunted, I would think it's residual.
And you had, of course, at the beginning of your program mentioned the exorcism that took place in your home. Um, do you know of other sites in Bisbee that have had um, such um, have that occur at that property?
No, I do not. And it's, performing exorcisms are it's a rarity. And honestly, I follow so many exorcists on social media. I have so many books on it. It's actually becoming more of an occurrence. But in Bisbee, no. And it might be because we are Catholic. Um, and again, when I share these ghost stories, I'm not trying to push my faith or my religion. I'm just trying to, I tell you what happened. And in that sense, that's the only thing I know of. And again, like I said, I did interview Father Stanley, and he at the time didn't know of anything, but they do see the records for that, for what happened to my family. Um, anybody can ask the priest now who's there now, or even Deacon Tony, and he might be able to tell you. But it has to be such a bad situation where demons are involved, And I'm not a demonologist in any way, but there is a difference between ghosts and demons. And I think there's a mix of that in that building in my childhood home.
All right. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'll stop it at two more questions. See, you're just too interesting.
Well, ghosts in Bisbee are very, very creepy and cool.
Um, what about the old horseman school? Do you have you heard anything occurring there?
No, I have not. Again, again, it was built as a school. My older sisters and brother went to junior high there, and the history about it's really neat. And then it was made into the county offices, and now it's has courtrooms in it. No, I don't know, but um, when I worked at the courthouse, when I say that it had erupting emotions, in the walls, is because if any of you who ever worked there or, any courthouse, but Bisbee is different because it's so gorgeous inside. It has all that marble. That's another thing about my being a magnet for residual hauntings. But we would be, walking, doing whatever we were doing as workers, and then the guards might yell, clear the halls, and they would have rifles, and they would be bringing in an inmate prisoner to be held in court. He'd be shackled. I have to cough. I'm sorry. I have a weak voice, so it's going. But anyway, the horseman might be the same way.
Well, as promised, we'll just do one last question, and it's actually about the Ghost app. They asked if you would kindly repeat the information about the self-guided tour and where you can get that information. And I will go beyond that and ask if it's available on both Android and iPhone.
It is, and it's also available in Spanish.
Oh, that's
But
cool.
you can find it and on the App Store. My voice. And it it has a pub crawl, it has a Main Street tour, it has the longer version, and it even has a Warren tour. So if you get the app, you can just read the individual stories. And Chris did a great job with the graphics and the mapping. He has a mapping, and he also has um, a, a tool, an EVP tool, where you can see, or if you can hear ghosts or see if they're around you. But it's pretty easy. I mean, when you get into the app, it'll show those different tours.
Well, thank you so much, Francine. This has just been a wonderful program. We appreciate you sharing your time with our audience yet again. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. And I apologize for my coughing, but I just love, of course, um, our hometown. And it's very important to, when you share your ghost stories, to please add the history and the connection of the two. And happy Halloween, everybody.
And I truly appreciate the historical context that you provide. Thank you so much. And just real quick, I want to let Deborah know that it is the Bisbee Ghost app, correct?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Thank you to everybody who joined us. See, it's catching. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. We hope to see you back on November 15th with our online program with Mike Anderson. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.